Good morning. Welcome to Skholar IAS Current Affairs classes. First issue is with respect to government securities. This particular topic is important in mains GS3 economic development part, and the issue is that RBI in its recent reforms proposed to give small investors direct access to the government securities trading platform. This is the actual news. So what are GSECs, that is government securities? Government securities are nothing but debt instruments issued by the government to borrow money. Basically, these government securities are issued by the RBI on behalf of the government, and they are of two types. One is treasury bills and the other is GSECs. Treasury bills are short-term debt instruments. It could have a maturity period of 91 days, 182 days, 364 days, while GSECs have maturity between 5 to 40 years. So basically these are all debt instrument and government issues because it wants certain money to fulfill its welfare measures. So that is why government is issuing these securities. So the current market scenario of these government securities is that these government securities currently the small investors can participate in market indirectly through the mutual funds or certain policies issued by the life insurance firms. Also, this G6 market is largely dominated by institutional investors like banks, mutual funds and insurance companies where the lot size is 5 crore or more. When the lot size is 5 crore or more, the retail investors cannot participate in these markets. That is the real problem now. So there is no liquidity in the secondary market for the small retail investors trade in smaller lot size. So there were earlier reforms carried out by the National Stock Exchange and the RBI, but the proposal did not get traction. The reforms were focused on involving small retail investors in the G6 market, but it did not take off very well. So recently RBI has issued a notification to allow small retail investors to open accounts in RBI's e-Kuber platform. This e-Kuber platform creates a market for social investors, small investors to invest in these instruments. So this is the news right now, and this is the evolution of the issue. So why is the RBI and the government keen to allow retail investors? As I've already told, RBI works on behalf of the government and it is a debt manager of the government of India. For the financial year 2021 and 2022, the government plans to borrow 12 lakh crore from the market that could lead to the increase in interest rate. Thus, increasing the broad base in terms of allowing new small retail investors may reduce the interest rates. Also, G6 are generally considered as the safest form of investment because they are backed by the government. The risk of default is almost nil because the government can never fail except in few cases like Greece and all other countries, but mostly governments don't fail and hence G6 gets credibility. So that is why they are called gilt-edged securities because they are really foolproof of the risks that is happening in the economic market and it is backed by the government. So the next issue is with respect to accredited driver training centers. This particular topic is important in mains GS2 governance part. Basically, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways has proposed that the accredited training centers be set up across the country. So the purpose of this is that any person who is accessing the service of accredited training centers would do a short course on driving and will receive a certificate from these centers. When they receive the certificate from these centers, they would be exempted from performing a driving test. Right now, when you go for a driving license test, you would be asked to drive the car or the bike in a prescribed fashion with respect to the rules that they are giving. But this particular proposal means that when you attend the short course in these driver training centers, you would be exempt from performing a driving test. So to actuate this scheme, Ministry has recently provided a draft notification to amend the central motor vehicle rules so that these training centers, to enable these training centers and introduce techniques of fuel efficient driving in the training modules. This is one of the environmental concern that is integrated with this scheme. So what does the training center does? Basically, these training centers are set up by anyone provided that they fulfill the accreditation criteria laid down by the government of India. Second, the transport authority or the designated official of the central government processes the application for a driver training center and they would be granted a license for 5 years to run the center. So if I am going to build a training center in my city, I'm going to seek a proposal, or I'm going to provide the application to the transport authority or the designated officials, and once they inspect and confirm that all the criteria is met, they will give me license for 5 years to run the center. Also, that training is different for candidates requiring different vehicles. For example, for medium to heavy vehicle, license is different, and light motor vehicle, the license is different, and the course will also be different. And with respect to testing, for both light motor as well as commercial heavy motor vehicle, simulation test will be done, and which is a part of the course itself. So, need for change. As per the recent estimates, it is found that India has a shortage of 2 million drivers in the transport industry. The shortage led to the driver fatigue and errors in driving, leading to road crashes and fatalities, because the entire demand for driving is manned by very few amount of drivers, and because of the work pressure, they also drive rashly and then involve in crashes and fatalities. Also, the official data shows that 84% of the road accidents occur due to negligence of the drivers, and hence these driving centers could bridge this gap. Third issue is with respect to water security, and this particular topic is important in mains GS3 environment part. The Himalayas are an important source of water for a billion people who live in the basins of Indus, Ganga, and Brahmaputra rivers. The rising temperatures can cause snowpacks or glaciers that are highly sensitive to melt, and because of this melting, it is a very big ecological problem that we are facing. This affects the ecological hydrology of the Himalayan mountains, and also affects countries like India, Nepal, Pakistan, China, depending on these rivers for who are depending on these rivers for daily needs and energy production. A new research found that Himalayan rivers are affected by different components such as rainfall runoff, snow melt, glacier melt. So basically, you might imagine that when Himalayas have so much of glaciers, when it is melting, the people in the downstream would be happy. That will be your assumption, but that is not true. When the glaciers melt, the water comes in the huge velocity, and it is not actually providing the yieldable water, that is usable water. Instead, it goes waste. So this is the problem, and also that during the river course, it causes greater erosion, and it could also mean that there could be the environmental damage that is caused by the melt of glaciers. These are all the repercussions because of the decrease in height of Himalayas, that is melting of glaciers. So it is further said that if the drier and warming scenario persists in the near future, it is more likely that the catchment areas will become or will experience water stress. It is also found that if there is increased rainfall, it could lead to water surplus conditions. So on one hand, it creates a drought-like situation in the catchment areas. On the other hand, there will be water surplus leading to flood and other problems. It even destroys crop. So researchers have developed glacial melt model and integrated into the currently used land surface model developed by Ministry of Earth Sciences. The land surface model does not take into account the situation of glacier melt, and hence provides an incomplete picture. That is why glacier melt model has been integrated into this system, so that we get an approximate idea about how much glacier is melt and what is the water scarcity or what is the water availability. All these things we could get from this system. So considering the better scenario, the research says that glacier melts by 15 to 70% in case of a warmer environment with its present volume. But once there is a melt, the glacial melt decreases by 3 to 38% when the glacier volume shrinks. So to compensate the loss of glaciers, we need to have increase in rainfall, or we should have a wetter scenario that is persistent. So research notes that proper water management and governance are urgently required to tackle the issue of changing patterns of precipitation system. So next issue is Toolkit. This is very important in terms of prelim science and technology part. So the news is the Delhi police have filed an FIR on charges of sedition, criminal conspiracy against creators of Toolkit on the farmer protest. So after the preliminary inquiry, it is found that it is created by the pro-Khalistani organizations. So basically, what is a toolkit? Toolkit is nothing but an instruction manual which have a particular objective. For example, DPII, which is the Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, has a toolkit for the implementation of the IPR. So this guidelines will be used for investigating IPR violations, applicable laws, and definition of terms such as counterfeit and piracy. So basically, in this toolkit, the problem is, so how the toolkit is linked to the protest? It's very simple. The protesters or have constructed a toolkit, and this toolkit is a kind of a manual that contains the articles regarding the protest as well as the method of protest. All these things the toolkit will be having. An individual can access the toolkit and act accordingly for the protest that is carried out. So this particular strategy is already followed in Hong Kong protest of 2019, climate protests across the world. So these toolkits acts like a director or a guidance material for the protesters to provide an effective protest. Also, the accessibility of social media has brought them into the spotlight over past few years. The police during the inquiry found that the prior action section in the toolkit had an action plan for January 26th riots. So basically, what is a toolkit? Toolkit is nothing but a guidelines manual for the protesters, and hence, because of this toolkit, there has been greater chaos in Delhi, and the farmer protesters have been intensifying, and hence several FIRs have been slapped on people who had made the toolkit. That is the real issue here. So these are the important issues that we have with regard to February 8 current affairs. For more videos, please log on to www.scholar.com. Thank you. Have a nice day.